Bees. Why does it have to be bees? Ask the Japanese, they must hate bees. Released in 1985 for the Nintendo Family Computer, courtesy of Tacoma Shoten, and based on the Capcom arcade game of the same name, Exed Exes, a.k.a. Savage Bees, is a vertical scrolling shooter where you control a little spaceship and must blow up other alien bugs, skulls, ground installations, and other things poised to kill you. At the end of each round, you fight a giant boss, which is a platform with a bunch of skulls and things that are shooting at you. And some rounds have high point segments where the screen goes dark and you could shoot down a bunch of enemies for big points. And sometimes during these high point segments, you can turn enemies into fruit for bigger points. And this lasts for a period of time until the words end appear. And then the action continues as usual. And that's pretty much Exed Exes, aka Savage Bees, in a nutshell. Now at first glance the game looks to be a knockoff of Namco arcade shooter Xevious, but that's actually not the case, for your blasters will strike anything that moves or is out of the ordinary, whether airborne or on the ground. And also you have screen nukes that clears the screen of projectiles and maybe some enemies, so really this is more of an evolution of the gameplay found in Capcom's earlier shooters, such as Vulgus or 1942. Speaking of which, another thing that Exed Exes has in common with 1942 is that this Famicom version was ported over by Micronix, who had developed a number of arcade ports over to Famicom in its early to mid days, and most of them are not very good, being kind there. Unfortunately, Exed Exes is no exception. Right off the bat, the game is saddled with jank. Heavy sprite flicker that makes dodging projectiles extremely difficult, especially when there's a lot going on screen, which is also when the heavy slowdown starts to hit. Also, the frame rate when it comes to scrolling is kinda crap. These are common Micronic issues, and I thank one Jeremy Parrish for giving me a name to my childhood pain. Otherwise, were it not for these technical issues plaguing this port, Exed Exes, or Savage Bees if you prefer, would have been a perfectly serviceable shooter game. Sure, its gameplay is somewhat unremarkable and rather derivative of Capcom's earlier efforts, but it's simple and straightforward to pick up and play, controls work about as well as you'd expect in this sorry state of a port, and you're fighting space bugs instead of Japanese zeros. That has to count for something, right? No? Okay, I tried. So you have continues, you have some power-ups, you have lots of jank. Jank, and to be fair, it's playable enough, but not quite ideal. Exed Exes is not a pleasant-looking game. Even without the jank frame rate, the constant slowdown, and the sprite flicker at death's door, you've got largely boring brown and gray scenery to fly over that's rather dull and boring. The foes you fight are seemingly random shapes of stuff that I say are space bugs because I've played the arcade game this is based on. The transition to high point segments where the stage blinks in and out of existence can be somewhat headache-inducing, and it just looks a mess. As far as the audio goes, well, admittedly, Exed Exes' droning jingles are a tad more pleasant to the ears than 1942's cacophony of white noise, whether it be on the Famicom or otherwise, but that's not saying a whole lot, and what few sound effects exist in this game are probably not worth mentioning in the first place. Overall, Exed Exes is given a raw deal on Famicom via a shoddy Micronix conversion. Granted, this was never the most memorable shooter in the early Capcom lineup, but that doesn't justify a crummy conversion job that feels like it's on the verge of crapping out every 5 seconds or so. Dare I say, it might actually be worse than 1942's turn on Famicom, which probably explains why Savage Bees never got ported over to NES overseas. In any event, if this is a game that interests you, the arcade version can be played via the Capcom Arcade Stadium package on modern platforms, and is probably the best version of the game to date. This Famicom port, on the other hand, is best left in Japan. And thank fuck they never ported Vulgus over to NES. That would have been a disaster.